And joining us now from San Francisco, retired U.S. Air Captain Chesley Sullenberger, who made that miraculous landing on the Hudson River 5 years ago. He's now our CBS News aviation and safety expert. Here with us in the studio, two more experts, the former head of the National Transportation and Safety Board, Mark Rosenker, who is now a CBS News analyst, and security analyst in our own Bob Orr, who's been covering this story since the plane went missing over a week ago. Well, Bob, you were making the point a while ago. I mean, the more we get into this, the larger the area they're searching. You were saying we're now searching an area that goes from Kazakhstan all the way down to Australia.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, we're covering now a great part of the globe, looking for a plane that looks large when you see it on a runway, but connected to the, or next to the Indian Ocean, it's just a speck. Bob, look, a week after this plane went missing, nobody can tell us with any authority where it went or why it went where it did. And now it's just a painstaking process where patience is going to be required for people that want answers right now.
Sully, walk us through this thing. We're now told that they're investigating the pilot and the co-pilot. Why has the investigation, in your view, taken that turn?
Bob, this is already one of the most remarkable episodes in the entirety of aviation history, and we're not by any means close to the end of it yet. But the aviation industry never willingly tolerates this level of ambiguity. You can be assured that great efforts, huge sums will be expended to solve this mystery, even though it's likely to take months or years. You know, absent finding the airplane and having physical evidence to look at, absent finding and analyzing what's on the recorders, they have to look in every other way, in old-fashioned detective work, trying to piece together this really puzzling situation.
You were an investigator, Mark. What should they be looking for now? Why is it they're just now getting around to looking into the backgrounds of the pilots?
Well, this is an extraordinary situation, as Sully said. We have not seen this kind of investigation held ever, at least in the history that I have been involved in it. We need to see everything. Since this is now becoming more a look at a criminal or terrorist type of activity rather than accident, and still accident is not off the table until we find a debris field, until we find a site where in fact the aircraft is on the ground. We do not know anything other than the kinds of information which has been provided us, and provided unfortunately very late in the game, by the Malaysian government. We learned something this morning which we should have learned much earlier. From the Malaysian Airlines, they told us that this had the appropriate amount of fuel, not anymore. Well, when you figure 6.5 hours to get to Beijing, then add some in for the alternate site, then add 45 minutes in case you needed it in emergency, we're looking at anywhere between 8 and 8.5 hours. That should have begun the process of trying to figure out where we might be looking during that period of time.
Sully, I want to ask you, one of the things we now seem to know that the plane at one point went to 45,000 feet, which is beyond where this aircraft should be going, and then went down to as low as 25,000 feet. How would you explain that? What does that suggest?
There are no operational reasons that I can think of that would explain it. There are reasons that one might end up in that situation, but again, I have no knowledge of what their motivation might have been, of who was actually in control of the airplane, their level of skill, or why these excursions of altitude would have taken place.
Or Bob, maybe nobody was in control.
Well, no, I think the evidence from satellite and radar, Bob, seems to show that somebody was flying the airplane, and for quite a long period of time, that it changed course, it changed altitude. This didn't look like an airplane completely out of control by any means. The thing that you have to remember here is, while we can't point to the pilots and you can't point to a hijacking or a rogue pilot act, what I think we can say is whoever disabled those systems, if it was done intentionally, and whoever changed the course of that airplane and flew to a spot where they knew they had no radar coverage, there was some level of knowledge, some sophistication, a knowledge about how that plane worked, how systems worked, and how you would want to go about being undetectable.
Mark, how is it that if this plane was, let's say, hijacked, or if it was going through all these contortions, wouldn't we have heard something from somebody's cell phone on that airplane?
Well, certainly not the cell phones. The cell phones begin
They don't
really,
work at that.
they just don't work at that altitude. What I am really disturbed about is once this transition was not captured by the Vietnamese, once they in fact saw some kind of a turn and flying over Malaysia for more than an hour, perhaps as much as an hour and 10 to 15 minutes, where was the Malaysian Air Force? Where were they to not come up, do an interception, and try to figure out what was going on? This is absolutely extraordinary to have an airliner fly over that area without the Malaysian Air Force trying to understand what it was.
Sully, could it be, and I mean this is just conjecture and speculation, could it be these pilots were trying to steal this airplane, or somebody was trying to just steal it and fly it to some point? I mean, it just, I don't understand anything about this story.
You know, many of the possibilities verge on a spy novel kind of situation. We simply don't know. Those things that you mentioned are theoretically possible. The real frustration is that we are learning more about this, as Mark and Bob have said, very late in the process. And with the passage of time, it makes the variability in the search much greater, and it makes it much harder ultimately to find out what really did happen.
Bob, do you think it's possible we may never find this wreckage? May never find this?
If you'd asked me that a week ago, I would have said no. We would find some debris. We would eventually trace the debris back to the wreckage field. I think as time goes on, Bob, with an area this large to search, I think it is possible, as hard as it is to believe, that we may never find the plane. And if we don't find the plane, and we don't find some kind of conclusive analytics evidence on the police side, I think there is a chance we might not know.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you this morning. Thank you, Captain Sullenberger.